Close your eyes and start imagining. In 67 AD, you're walking through one of the crowded streets of ancient Rome. As you walk through the Forum, what you see astonishes you. Emperor Nero is passing by. Next to him is a beautiful woman in silk robes, wearing jewels. But there are people whispering in the crowd, because everyone actually knows. This woman was once a boy named Sporus. So what did Nero do to him? How did he make him his wife? This is the story I'm going to tell you today, and believe me, this story will deeply affect you. Before listening to these forgotten stories, if you love learning the hidden truths that history conceals, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts so that people listening to these ancient stories from different parts of the world can discover together, connected by common curiosity, making it more exciting. Our story is so astonishing that this isn't just oh, Roman rich people had very extravagant lives kind of story. This is a story of how power poisons and drives a person mad, how love turns into obsession, and how grief creates a monster. Let's start with the man at the beginning of this event, Nero. Nero wasn't actually bad by birth. No, quite the opposite. In his early days, he was quite promising. When he ascended to the throne at 16, everyone was saying, wow, this is the golden age of our empire. He lowered taxes, brought opportunities for people to enjoy themselves. He even performed plays on stage. People loved Nero. They loved him very much. But absolute power changed him. Slowly, silently, it poisoned him. By 65 AD, Nero was no longer his former self. Something had snapped in his head. Put yourself in his place. You're the sole master of an empire with a population of 60 million. No one can say no to you. No one can criticize you. No one can say you're doing wrong to you. This situation made him sick. Perhaps he was going mad from paranoia, or perhaps from that loneliness. It was at this very point that the person who had the most different and special place in Nero's life was worth much more to him than anything else. Her name was Poppaea Sabina, and she had everything Nero could want. Incredibly beautiful, smart enough to handle him, and ambitious like a true queen. Poppaea wasn't ordinary. She was a powerful woman who understood politics, knew what she wanted. When Nero first set his eyes on Poppaea, he was already married to Octavia, the previous emperor's daughter. But it was a cold marriage. There was no love between them. Poppaea, on the other hand, was different in every way. Octavia was quiet, shy, and introverted. Poppaea was lively and radiated joy. While Octavia loved staying in the shadows and being invisible to everyone, Poppaea loved shining under the lights like a stage star. And Nero? Nero didn't fall in love with this woman. He literally became obsessed. According to historians' accounts, if other men looked at Poppaea too long during state meetings, he would have fits of rage. He would place guards everywhere, not to protect, but to watch her. He would shower her with gifts that would put the imperial treasury in difficulty. Jewels from India, silks from China, perfumes from Arabia. He divorced Octavia and married Poppaea. But it wasn't enough. To truly possess her, he separated and isolated the woman from her family and friends. He had dozens of statues and portraits made of her, to see her, even when they were apart. Sometimes he would sit for hours watching what Poppaea was doing. This wasn't romance. This was a disease. He was sick, confusing love with possession. He saw Poppaea not as a person, but as an object. Poppaea wasn't stupid, of course. She knew very well that her beauty and Nero's obsession gave her power. But she was also aware that she was playing a dangerous game. That's why she had woven her own network and gathered supporters in case Nero's interest waned. But Poppaea had one mistake. She was fearless. While everyone in the palace was deathly afraid of opposing Nero, she was her own master. She would argue with him, criticize him, and even often mock him. In 65 AD one day, everything started with an ordinary domestic argument. Some sources say Nero came home late from chariot races, while other sources mention it was because he was busy with theater work. But the result would always be the same and heavy. According to Tacitus's account, Poppaea dared to criticize Nero that day. "You don't think about your responsibilities as a husband and father. You only care about how you appear in the eyes of the people," she said. And during this argument, the woman was pregnant. She was expecting their second child. Perhaps that's why she couldn't endure it anymore. Then what happened, you ask? Nero lost control. He had such an intense burst of rage that he kicked his pregnant wife. This kick was so violent that her insides were torn apart. While some say it was a single blow, other sources mention it was a prolonged assault, leaving the woman on the ground in pools of blood, unconscious. Just think, when Nero realized what happened and came to his senses, what occurred? The man who commanded 30 legions, who could execute anyone with a word, who was worshipped as a god in the East, destroyed the only thing he truly cared about with his own hands. Nero threw himself over Poppaea. While begging for her forgiveness, he was also commanding, "Live," as if he could even command the angel of death. He summoned Rome's best physicians, shouting, "Save her! I'll drown you in wealth. If you can't save her, I'll torture you and throw you in prison." But it was too late for everything. Poppaea died within a few hours, along with her unborn baby. At that moment, Nero's mind flew from his head. But his atrocities weren't finished yet. He declared her a goddess, established a cult in her honor, and spent days talking to her corpse as if he could still hear her. Sporus, who was 14 years old at the time, was a boy working in the palace. Sporus was born into slavery in the imperial household and had been freed as a child. He was raised within the palace walls, receiving an education prepared for administrative duties. He was still a young boy when he caught Nero's attention, and this young man's life would turn into a nightmare. What made Sporus special in Nero's eyes wasn't his intelligence or skills, but his face. Many ancient sources say the young man looked remarkably like the dead Poppaea. They particularly resembled each other in terms of eyes and bone structure. In that era when physical similarity was believed to show a deeper, spiritual connection, this resemblance was seen as supernatural. When Nero first saw Sporus after Poppaea's death, lights flickered again in the emperor's shattered mind. The resemblance was so obvious that for a moment Nero believed that Poppaea's soul had returned in a new form. Of course, there was an obvious problem. Sporus was male, but for this man who had convinced himself he was a god, who had talked to a corpse for months, changing someone's gender was a small obstacle. Nero didn't just force Sporus to dress like a woman. He summoned Rome's best physicians to make the transformation permanent. He ordered them to perform surgery so that young Sporus would look completely like a woman. The surgery was dangerous, painful, and irreversible. This type of infection usually resulted in death from blood loss. But even if Sporus survived, he would be forever changed physically, emotionally, and socially. He would never be able to have children, never be able to have normal relationships. He wouldn't even be counted as a man by Roman society. The surgery took place in the imperial palace, in a room specially prepared for this work. Ancient surgical procedures were primitive, relying on basic tools and crude anesthetics. The process was unbearably painful. The surgery lasted for hours, and the risk of death was very close. Sporus was held by guards, while the physicians did their work. His screams echoed throughout the palace. Weeks after Sporus recovered, Nero announced news that shocked even Roman aristocrats. He would marry the young man with a full imperial wedding ceremony. Preparations took months and largely depleted the treasury's resources. Sporus was given a new name, Sabina, after the dead empress, and was given a special room where he could prepare for his new role. The imperial tailor redesigned all his clothes, designing dresses that would beautify his altered physique and hide his masculine physical features. Master jewelers designed ornaments specifically for him. Most contained precious stones that once belonged to Poppaea. These weren't just accessories, but tangible connections to the dead empress. Physical reminders of the person Sporus was forced to replace. Makeup artists taught him cosmetic techniques to make his features feminine. They showed him how to use charcoal to make his eyes look larger and more beautiful, blush for pink cheeks, powders to soften facial angles. These trainings weren't just about appearance. They were systematic efforts to erase his original identity. Hairdressers taught him hairstyling techniques that were fashionable among aristocratic Roman women. This process involved procedures that lasted hours every day. Many servants and heated metal tools were provided. But perhaps the psychologically heaviest and most difficult were the feminine behavior and attitude lessons. Teachers were assigned to teach Sporus how to walk, sit, and gesture properly like a lady. He was taught how to hold his hands, how to place his feet together, how to arrange his clothes when sitting, and how to behave within spaces in a way that conveyed grace instead of masculine movements. Voice coaches worked with him to change his speech patterns, teaching him to speak in higher and thinner tones and linguistic behavior patterns associated with feminine speech. Can you imagine the psychological torture of this transformation? Sporus had to look in the mirror every day at a stranger wearing his face. Every piece of jewelry that once adorned a dead woman was now a shackle binding him to a role he never chose. The wedding was planned for spring of 67 AD. Nero had spared no expense, treating this wedding as a legitimate imperial wedding, worthy of the greatest emperor in Roman history. The ceremony took place in the great palace hall, decorated with imported flowers and lit by thousands of oil lamps. Musicians played traditional wedding songs, while servants served the finest wines and delicacies. Following the wedding, Nero treated Sporus exactly as he would treat a legitimate empress. But all this apparent luxury came with a terrible price. Sporus was expected to accompany Nero at public functions, sit beside him at state dinners, and play the faithful wife in all interactions. For more than 2 years, Sporus lived this strange existence. By 68 AD, Nero's excesses had finally strained Rome's state structure too much. Throughout the empire, revolts broke out initiated by statesmen tired of Nero's erratic behavior and neglect of governance. The Praetorian Guards opposed Nero's continued rule, and the Senate accused him of being a traitor. As Nero finally fled Rome with a small group of supporters, Sporus was with him. Even face to face with death, he couldn't leave behind the living reminder of Poppaea. They took refuge in a forest house outside Rome. While waiting to be rescued or caught, Nero wavered between escape plans and suicide. When news came that enemies were approaching, Nero chose death rather than capture. But his suicide left Sporus incredibly vulnerable as one of the most visible symbols of Nero's reign. He was both a valuable prize and a dangerous responsibility for whoever gained power next. The following period was perhaps even more tragic. Sporus became a political pawn, passed from the hands of one powerful man to another like valuable property. He was first seized by Nymphidius Sabinus, then by Otho, then by Vitellius, each treating him as Nero had, continuing to dress him as a woman and calling him by Poppaea's name. Under Vitellius, Sporus's nightmares would reach their ultimate conclusion. The new emperor decided to use him in the Colosseum for public entertainment, in reenactments of mythological scenes, specifically involving violence and humiliation. For Sporus, this represented the ultimate degradation, to be sexually humiliated before the eyes of thousands of people for their entertainment. Rather than submit to this final humiliation, Sporus made the only choice that had truly been his for years. In 69 AD, probably by poison, he ended his own life. He was only 20 years old when this painful event occurred. What makes Sporus' story so disturbing isn't just the abuse he suffered, but how his identity and freedom were systematically taken from him. From the moment Nero decided he resembled Poppaea, Sporus ceased to exist as an individual and became a slave to the emperor's twisted fantasies. Perhaps most tragic is that we know almost nothing about who Sporus was before this transformation. What were his hopes and dreams? What did he want to do with his life? All of this was erased when he became Nero's living doll, his original identity completely lost. A boy forced to become an empress, subjected to years of psychological and physical abuse, who ultimately chose a dignified death over further humiliation. His story deserves to be remembered not just as a tale and curiosity from ancient Rome, but as a testament to both human cruelty and human resilience, even 2,000 years later. If you want to learn more stories hidden in history like this one, don't forget to subscribe and like.